Good evening. Let's call our regular business meeting to order, and I'm going to ask the treasurer to call the roll.
President Baker.
Present.
Mr. Brown. Vice President Cole.
Here.
Ms. Gibbs.
Here.
Ms. Hudson. Ms. Reyes.
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. And I'm going to call on Principal Myers from Columbus Spanish Immersion Academy and some of her students to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, both in English and in Spanish at this time. Everyone, please be upstanding. Principal? Yes, welcome the students. Welcome, students.
Prometo fidelidad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y a la república que representa una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And Principals Myers and the students will be back with us right after we adopt the agenda. Thank you very much for being here. All right. I will briefly read through the agenda so we all know the work before us this evening, and then I'll call for a motion to adopt the agenda. So we will hear from our students from CSIA tonight and their principal. We have a number of special recognitions that we will present tonight. We'll then take public comment, and we do have a number of speakers signed up to address the board this evening. We will then hear from our direct reports. They'll share their reports with the board. We will then take up our consent agenda, after which the board will share announcements and points of pride, after which the board will recess into executive session. After executive session, the board will return here to these chambers at the conclusion of those deliberations. Having said that, is there a motion that we adopt the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Mr. Treasurer?
President Baker.
Yes.
Vice President Cole.
Yes.
Ms. Gibbs.
Yes.
Ms. Reyes.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you very much. Principal Myers, would you join us at the podium? And then the floor is yours if you'd like to tell us what's going to happen this evening.
At this time, our students would like to share with you their school pledges. So they have it in English and Spanish that they would like to share with you. If my sixth graders would come back up. Little guys, you can stand up too. So these pledges embody what the students believe about themselves and their school.
Yo puedo comunicar en inglés y español. Yo soy responsable, yo soy respetuoso, yo soy servicial, yo soy amigable, yo soy un ciudadano que puede influir positivamente al mundo que me rodea. I am bilingual. I can communicate in Spanish and English. I am responsible, I am helpful, and I am friendly. I am a citizen who will positively affect the world around me.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Yes, he's ready for his applause. Right now, Allison Boyer, our music teacher, would like to lead the children in a song.
So you guys can all hear me. I don't want to have to walk around and back. So we have prepared for you just a song, a Mexican folk song called De Colores. So you're going to stand nice and tall. Your eyes are closed. Yeah. Hand the paper, yeah. And go stand next to Selena. All right. If you know the words, please join in.
President Baker, Vice President Cole, Superintendent Stanford, I thank you for letting our students come and present to you this evening. I also put in to your packets a bit of information about our report card, and I think that speaks to what these kids are doing at our school. And I really wanted you to take some time and to look at that because they are really growing. We received all Bs in, we received Bs in progress, we received Bs in gap closure, and also in K-3 literacy. And only 15% of the schools in the state of Ohio that carry that category received Bs or higher in K-3 literacy. So our kids are working really, really hard, and I wanted you to know that. So. Okay, come on, guys.
Well, do you have anything else you'd like to share with us?
They're great kids. It's a great place to work, and Columbus City Schools should be proud of all of their children.
I think they have a great principal and a great staff helping them to succeed. So
thanks.
if we have time, could we ask everyone to gather right up here, and we're going to take a photograph. And actually, as we're gathering, why don't we have Board Member Reyes read the resolution, and we'll all gather, and then we'll vote on the resolution when we come back.
I need a second, so don't move. Okay. So I'd like to read the resolution to commemorate the National Hispanic Heritage Month. Whereas Hispanic Heritage Month, which began at National Hispanic Heritage Week in 1968, and which was later expanded to National Hispanic Heritage Month in 1988, began on September 15th, the day which represents the anniversary of independence for 5 Latin American countries. And whereas Hispanic Americans represent an array of distinct and vibrant cultures, each of which enriches our community and contributes to our spirit of success in many valuable ways. And whereas Hispanic Americans have made important contributions to the cultural fabric of this country while achieving significant recognition in American literature, science, music, and political leadership. And whereas Hispanic Americans have helped to shape our community and have had profound influences through a strong commitment to family, faith, and community, an enduring work ethic, and their many contributions to society, including serving on school boards and working in our educational communities. And whereas 13% of our students identify as Hispanic, the third largest segment of our student population, and whereas Hispanic Heritage Month is intended to broaden and increase the awareness of the many Hispanic contributions to American culture, to show how diversified the Hispanic community is, and to promote a greater interest in young people as to the Hispanic history and culture. Now therefore, be it resolved that the Columbus Board of Education does hereby honor and recognize September 15th through October 15th, 2018 as National Hispanic Heritage Month. Second. Can you second it?
Second.
That's a motion, that's a second. Mr. Chair, recall the roll.
Vice President Cole?
Yes.
Ms. Gibbs? Yes. Ms. Reyes?
Yes.
President Baker?
Yes, sir.
Motion carried.
Thank you very much. All right, could everyone gather here and look back? If you're from CSIA, you should be in the picture. That includes parents. Anybody else who's supporting the children from CSIA, please come up and join me in the photo.
Couple. All right, one more. Perfect. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much, students. Let's give them one last round of applause as they leave the room. Thank you to all of you who helped make this possible this evening. Thank you, Board Member Reyes. Thank you. All right. We have another special recognition this evening, and it is related to National Principals Month. And so I'm going to call on April Knight, who is principal at Avondale. I think there she is. Come on up to the podium. And she's also president of the Columbus Administrators Association. And so come right on up and be recognized and share a few comments if you would like. And in fact, any other principal who is in the room, please join her. And actually, assistant principals as well, I think we may have some, and LIs. And Principal Knight, the floor is yours.
Thank you,
Yes, ma'am.
President Baker, Vice President Cole, and board members. We greatly appreciate this opportunity for us to join you tonight and to recognize National Principals Month. As we just saw with that wonderful group of children that were joined us today, led by a great leader in Ms. Myers, what we do every day is very important, and we appreciate you recognizing that. So I have some colleagues here with me. I will let each one introduce themselves, and then I have two special guests that are joining us this evening.
Good evening, Janet Routsong, principal of Whetstone High School and Columbus City School alumni.
Good evening, Kevin Hayner, principal of Shady Lane Elementary. Kimberly Mills, Principal, Mifflin High School, also proud Columbus City School alumni.
Tiffany Getton, hopefully approved by you guys, interim principal at Mays Elementary.
We also have joining us this evening Dr. Julie Davis, who is the Executive Director of OAESA, which is the Ohio Association of Elementary School Administrators, and Mark Jones, her Associate Executive Director, and I think they would like to speak to the board.
Thank you, April. Thank you, President Baker, men and women of the Board of Education, Superintendent Stanford. Thank you so much for having the vision and taking the initiative to honor and to thank and to celebrate with the rest of the nation October as National Principals Month. As we know, there's no more critical relationship to a student's success than that teacher in the classroom. Second to that, though, research continually shows that that leader in the building, that principal, the assistant principal, is key. And my belief is there's no successful school without a successful leader. And just working collaboratively with the teachers, working with the teacher leaders, and of course our central office administrators, thank you so much for honoring what those men and women do every day. They get up, they greet the kids at the bus, they've already checked on subs, then they go around, make sure there's attendance, they do evaluations, they make sure that the floors are clean, they then go in and take a couple voicemails, they listen to happy parents, they listen to disgruntled parents, they talk to kids that are doing great things, and this is just by 10 a.m. So I thank them for what they do each and every day. You have a wonderful administrative group here. We are blessed to have them as members of our association, and I just want to thank you very much for taking the time to honor them. So thanks again, and thank you, April, for inviting us.
Thank you. I'm going to call on the Vice President to read a resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I just want to again, very shortly and briefly, thank you so much for the work that you contribute on a daily basis. Whereas each year the month of October is designated National Principal Month to honor preschool, elementary, middle, and high school principals and recognize the importance of school leadership in ensuring that every child is highly educated, prepared for leadership and service, and empowered for success as citizens in a global community. And whereas principals are educational visionaries, instructional leaders, assessment experts, adept communicators, budget analysts, facility managers, and special program administrators entrusted with our most valuable resource, our students. And whereas principals exemplify our spirit of success as they work tirelessly to maintain academic accountability, to ensure a safe and productive learning environment where students learn, grow, and thrive, and to encourage and facilitate teachers' and parents' efforts to make a position difference in the lives of young people. And whereas principals and assistant principals are responsible for the day-to-day operation of their schools, which includes leading the instructional program to ensure our students are ready for success, managing educational initiatives, and building relationships with students, teachers, and parents, and community partners, and others to achieve excellence. And whereas the dedication and determination of a principal sets the academic tone for their schools as they work collaboratively with teachers to develop and maintain high curriculum standards and set performance goals and objectives. Now therefore be it resolved that the Columbus Board of Education does hereby honor and recognize October 2018 as National Principal Month. And be it further resolved that the Columbus Board of Education values and thanks all of our principals, assistant principals, and leadership interns throughout the district for their contributions to our spirit of success, helping create a world-class model, and this is our vision, a world-class model of public education that prepares members of our community to reach their full potential. God bless you and thank you.
Ms. Gibbs? Yes. Ms. Reyes?
Yes.
President Baker? Yes. Vice President Cole?
Absolutely, yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Now, Principal Knight and anyone else who you'd like to have come up, including our OAESA representatives, come right on up for a photograph, please. Let's thank all of our principals one more time. And thanks also to Julie Davis and Mark Jones from OAESA for being here with us tonight. We appreciate it. Thank you for your leadership. Yes. Are there comments from my colleagues for actually either one of those resolutions?
Just want to share in the thanks and the congratulations to our incredible Spanish immersion program and their leadership, and to the principals and your overall leadership of our buildings. It was described to us last week that our principals are like the mayors of a small town, right? They have facilities, they are in charge of families, communities, the streets surrounding their communities, the business partners, and the faith communities. And a lot of them all work together to make those buildings work. So I really do thank you for not just being a principal. I thank you for being the instructional leader. I thank you for being the chief care person in charge. I thank you for being the firefighter, putting out all the fires during the day and working football and basketball games at night. I mean, it is not a 7-3 by any means. But I also would want to, and I know they're dying, but if you are a former principal, would you just wave your hand? Just wave your hand in the crowd. Yes, we know. We have former principals. And so you know exactly what it takes to get the job done. So I thank you all, past and present. To our Executive Director of High Schools, Ms. Cherie Wells, thank you for your constant and diligent leadership guiding them and Ms. Pettis over our middle schools and all of our regional executive directors over our elementary schools. Thank you all for your service to make sure everyone is successful.
Gibbs. Colleagues, any other comments? Board Member Reyes?
It's hard to follow up thanking everybody like that, but I do also want to express my thank yous. It's very important. I know from personal experience with two of the couple of children that just walked out, that's my godson and his older brother, they talk about Principal Myers all the time. So that tells you not only how much of an influence their teacher is, but also how important the principal is. They miss her if she does not say hello in the morning when they're getting off the bus, and if she's missing at any point, they surely let us know. There is a lot to say about having a good principal, and that's why I proudly recruit people to our schools. I think Principal Myers probably has benefited most. I think I've recruited about 5 or 10 of her students, give or take. But I also want to talk a little bit about Hispanic Heritage Month. As a child that grew up in a time when I was told that I should not speak Spanish in school, I did not have the right to do that. And then later growing up and people telling me that being bilingual was a deficiency instead of something to be proud of and something that was actually adding value to my growth and my academic growth and then my own personal growth. And to really, really hear Senora Myers talk about what our babies are doing in a bilingual school. And it's not only the only bilingual school that we have. We have our French immersion, and we have our Mandarin, and we have our international school and our global academy. So I just want to stress that being bilingual and having that opportunity, and having the opportunity not only to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month, but the diversity of our district is important. Even though right now we're focusing on one, but it's just a highlight of what our district represents, and I'm very proud to be a member of this district and principals and teachers and students make that possible.
Thank you. Mr. Vice President?
She said it all.
Okay, very well then. She did. All right, let's move on then to, thank you everyone for that. Let's move on to public comment. We do have 4 speakers who have signed up to address the board this evening. So I will call your name and ask you to approach the podium. You will have 4 minutes to speak. There should be a timer you'll see on the screen, and we would ask that you conclude at the end of your 4 minutes. First speaker, Lakeisha Jefferson. Topic, safety and transportation, board action, have more effective safety protocols and management of transportation. Ms. Jefferson, good evening.
Good evening, President Baker, Vice President Cole, Treasurer B, International Auditor Smith, members of the board, Interim Superintendent Dr. Stanford. I'm also a CCS alumni, and I'm here today to present just a couple topics around transportation safety and school safety. So I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous. Okay, so with respect to transportation safety, I asked the district to expeditiously move to action to have drivers to comply with visibility, badge visibility. Since my daughter started school at the end of August, we've had more than 6 bus drivers. I understand that the permanent driver is out on medical leave. So we've had to, definitely had some troubleshooting to, again, as I, in safety, encourage my daughter to take account of her own personal safety. And in order to do so, we definitely will have to make sure that we are having drivers to have that visibility, because I ask for that every time I deal with a different driver. Our country can't be an orange alert for security measures, and then we're operating in the gray area as far as our drivers not having that badge visibility. I know it's been a concern for my daughter, and she's 7, as I try to, again, instill her own personal safety with the expectations on the bus, with no seatbelts and other things that she can do to make sure that she's in the right space. You can't tell her so much about who to look for every day because it's a different face. So if we could definitely move, I understand that they are asked to have their badges visible when they're entering the school, but that should definitely be something on the bus as well. And then I also asked that we potentially move to form an analytics team to allow for us to forecast traffic patterns and routes. Understand we have 700 routes. We have the largest school district, and as the dollar says, it's like driving to the moon and back. I think it's important to be able to be more proactive than reactive, and allowing us to study trends. So I think an analytics team will allow for us to study some trends and more effective management with the routes. Now, moving to school safety, I think we definitely have some opportunities with the student ID badge program. I believe the high schools may potentially be able to be at the best position to kind of pilot grants and building access with their badges, because right now their badge is just to get on the bus and say, I'm a student with the student ID number. I guess the direction that we're moving in, or I should say the state that we're in across the national scope, is that, again, with increased school shootings and violence, I think that with a high school level, to have that badge and allow for them to have building and grounds access would be a step in the right direction for school safety. Just like at work, I can't get into a building if I don't have my badge to allow for me to have access into that building. So I think that in spending the dollars, we can be more frugal and also kind of route and divert how we allow for them to, again, the responsibility to socialize them to keep the importance of keeping up with that badge. It's like your driver's license. You have to have that on you at all times. When you're driving, you have to be responsible to have that as well. So I think that we can begin to socialize them with the high school level to have for them to have that badge, the importance of keeping up with that and allowing for them, the doors to be locked and have those students badge in and out. That also will help us to track their whereabouts as well. And that's what I kind of move to action and has the board to consider that as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Jefferson. That was perfect timing. Any clarifying questions? Board Member Gibbs?
Thank you. Thank you for addressing us. And I was saying, speak a little louder in the microphone. But just for clarification, on your first point, are you asking that the bus drivers have badges that are visible to parents and students when they onboard the bus?
That is correct. I understand that they do have a ID badge. This, again, should be visible, and there's been a number of times I've asked the driver to display that badge so I can understand who am I speaking with, that they should be on that route. Because when you have so many different drivers, I think that it does kind of doesn't put me at ease that if her bus was, again, worst case scenario, hijacked, she wouldn't know the difference of if that driver's supposed to be on the bus or not. I don't think that that's an extreme measure to say that, or a far reach to say that in the state that we're in currently.
Thank you.
Any other clarifying questions from board members? Ms. Gibbs?
And was your first point also bus driver consistency? Looking to get did you say your bus driver is out?
On medical leave.
Okay,
I'm
you're out,
definitely,
but okay.
I again appreciate all the work that the teachers do. As far as teacher appreciation, I not only commend the teachers and the principals, but as well as my bus drivers. However, I think that as far as with that is, I get it, right? We move, we have a lot of moving parts. Drivers are out. We most often have to backfill for that to be able to ensure the route is being carried out. However, I think that it just helps to have that badge visibility. I understand that all drivers, when they have school dealings where they have to come into the school, they have to have their badge. They can't just walk in the building with it in their wallet or not disclose. I mean, to not be able to see that. So I just ask that that is something that is visible on them as they're on the routes.
Thank you. Got it.
Yes, Vice President Cole, a clarifying question?
Yes, just Dr. Stanford, is it possible that you could just introduce the Director of Transportation? You could just raise his hand if she had any additional questions about protocol or how we can be proactive. I'd love for them to at least be able to make that connection while they're here.
Mr. President, Mr. Cole, our Director of Transportation, Stephen McElroy, who's standing right behind you, and he would be more than happy to work with you.
I've spoken with him.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I thank you, Doctor.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much for coming down to speak to us.
Thank you.
Have a good night. All right, and our next speaker, Lilia Ba, topic Facilities Task Force Recommendations, Board Action, requested consider my proposal.
Hello, I'm going to make sure I speak in the microphone so I
Hi
don't
there.
get reprimanded a little bit. I'm Leela Ba, and my daughters attend Northeast Elementary and Intermediate Schools. Be careful not to say names because I'm going to ask you to consider something that could, it's kind of controversial. I submitted my proposal, so it's in writing, and so I'm not going to go over it. You can look over it and see what you think. But in short, we have a high school in my neighborhood that has roughly 600 kids in it, and it was taken off of the closure list. And I asked why, and I didn't really get an answer that I felt like was a good answer. So I said, I'm just going to wait and see what happens and see where the district lands on these closures. The high school is definitely a good high school. They have a lot of kids that are involved in a lot of activities, but only 300 of the kids from my community attend that school, whereas I have a middle school that's almost 900. So I propose that high school be converted to a middle school, and the only sixth grade only building that's here in Columbus City be converted to, if money permits, an early learning center. We have a lot of newly arrived Americans in our area, so I think it would be a benefit to those newly arrived Americans, just giving them enriched cultural activities, helping with their acculturation process. There's just a lot of benefits to helping them make connections early on. I also think it would be beneficial to all the elementary schools in my pathway because we're all at capacity and we don't have the opportunity to have a really quality pre-K program. So if this particular school was turned into an early learning center, that would benefit all of the kids in my neighborhood. And then finally, a middle school is so important. The transitions that my daughters will have to go through if we choose to continue with Columbus City Schools is a lot. You transition at 4th grade, you transition at 6th grade, you transition then again at 6th grade again to go to 7th grade. That's a lot, and I think it's a deterrent to a lot of area families. So making us have that typical grade configuration will go a long way, and I believe it would be a strong school. The numbers came out to the intermediate school and the other neighboring elementary school, and they were strong, so it would be a strong middle school. So I think that's all. Does anyone have any questions?
Colleagues, are there any clarifying questions for Ms. Baugh? Board Member Gibbs?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Baugh, and thank you for your continued advocacy for your community that's up north off of 161. Brown and Gold. In essence, is your advocacy to establish a middle school so that that feeder pattern can return to traditional grade bands?
Yes.
And the traditional grade bands, you want K-5, 6, 8, 9, 12.
Well, I understand why the district wouldn't want to turn our intermediate school or close it because of the capacity issues at the 2 feeder schools. So I understand that. And it did really, it's done relatively well. I think the first step to returning those schools to that typical grade configuration was to just give us a middle school, like a solid middle school. So more so the middle school that we return to the 6th, 7th, and 8th would be on the same campus. There wouldn't be 2 campuses. There would be one campus for the middle schoolers that would be fed by our intermediate and another neighboring school.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other clarifying questions, colleagues? Ms. Baugh, thank you very much for being here this evening. We appreciate your ongoing advocacy on behalf of children.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night. Our next speaker is Rodney Kent. Topic, merging of Lyndon McKinley STEM. Board action requested. Merging of the high school would be an opposition and safety issue. Mr. Kent, good evening.
Some of that is carryover from my first one. My interest this evening, President, Vice President Baker, President Cole, and Mr. Stafford. I address you this evening because of what I feel is an insufficiency of time. I am currently requesting that this board delay any vote on the facilities management project until after the first of the year. We have a holiday in the early January until after that period. This would allow the incoming superintendent, I know you're going to an executive session, you're going to fill a seat. This would allow time for that individual to become accustomed with the things that are taking place, and also for the incoming superintendent to have an opportunity to weigh in, since this will be on her watch. We're asking that you do this so that the community can begin to organize. We had a church meeting this past Thursday, and the churches are willing to meet with community people. And this time frame would allow such meetings to take place in the community. And an alternate program to the current program that you have from the facilities team would be injected at that time. And there's one currently, and some others have some ideas, excuse me, so that we may be able to come back to you with something of substantialness and say, this is why we're asking, and this is what we're asking for. If you'll recall, in the last time I approached you, I talked about doing something in this district that has not been done. You have almost a $4 million property on the Hamilton Avenue site where Hamilton Elementary STEM Academy, now the defunct Linmore Middle School, and since Lyndon has been under attack, this is the second time since you remodeled it, we feel that creating a Lyndon McKinley on that Hamilton property would create a campus environment. It would also allow us to be the first school in Columbus, other than what Afrocentric has done, to have an actual regulation gym floor that would allow us to host activities as prescribed by the Ohio Athletic Association. And these are the things that are on the table. You got a proud community, and they would like for you to delay any votes until after the first of the year. I know there's a holiday in early January, and that will give these churches and the community people time to organize properly and present to you an alternative to what you are proposing in your facilities management program.
Thank you, Mr. Kent. Are there any clarifying questions, colleagues, for Mr. Kent? Mr. Vice President?
Thank you, Mr. President. You mentioned that there was a community of folks involved that you were looking at trying to engage. You mentioned in part the faith community. Are there any other organizations locally that you're trying to convene to have this conversation?
This conversation is in its infancy at this time, but it is starting to grow. And we are also talking with the people from the east side of Columbus to hold a meeting at their location, absent of any school board members, no pun intended, but to bring about a consensus of thought to address a number of issues that are currently on the table. And this can only happen through a series of meetings, and then a consensus being drawn from those meetings, allowing the community to actually have a footprint, and it would also allow a feeder program to the schools that are there and make us self-contained.
Thank you, Mr. Kent, so much for your advocacy and your work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night. Our final speaker is, and I apologize if I get this wrong, Kujenga Ash. Topic, quality of education. I beg your pardon. Oh, excuse me. Good evening. Quality of education at Lyndon McKinley STEM. Board action requested slow down the move from changing Lyndon McKinley STEM to a middle school, also improve the quality of the education at Lyndon. Thank you. Good evening. Good to see you.
Good evening, giving honor to the Almighty, creator of all things. President Baker, Vice President Cole, Treasurer Barak, Internal Auditor Smith, members of the board, and Interim Superintendent Dr. Stanford. I'm very humbled, first of all, to be here to stand before you. I enjoyed the children's presentation. That meant so much to me. I am a member of the Baptist Ministerial Alliance of Columbus, Ohio, and vicinity. President Tyrone Laws, member of the Baptist Pastors Conference. Pastor Frederick Lamar is the president. I'm a member of the Interdenominational Ministerial Alliance of Columbus, Ohio, and vicinity. Dr. John Coates II is our president. I'm also the organizer of the Concerned Lyndon Clergy. The Concerned Lyndon Clergy is a group of about 70 churches and community activists and organizers. And we are, number one, very concerned about the quality of education at Lyndon STEM. That's our number one concern. I was at the meeting at Lyndon McKinley High School, which I used to attend as a kid. I'm a proud graduate of Columbus City Schools. I went to Lyndon in 69, 70, 71. After the riots, I had to leave Lyndon. I graduated from East High School. So you're talking about a move from Lyndon to East. Back in the old days, when we had arguments, we'd settle them with fists. But now they settle arguments with powder and lead. And this is a very serious thing that you're contemplating doing. We have a different social milieu on the north end and the east side. It's different. And we have a number of groups. Some of them are people are in gangs. The marijuana is not even like the marijuana that we used to have back in the day. You get some resin on your fingers. Now it's chemicals. They grow it with chemicals. They grow it under lights. They dip it in fentanyl and other kinds of things. And students are in class, their eyes are just wide open. You know, they can't concentrate. And all of these things are going to clash if you move the Lyndon students over to East High School. And you're going to have a lot of problems. I like Mr. Kent's idea, waiting till after the first of the year to take a vote, give the people in the churches a chance to organize and talk, give the community a chance to organize and talk and discuss this thing out. There's a security issue also because the latchkey kids, when their older siblings are over at East High School from Lyndon, and the latchkey kids come in, they have no supervision. And if the parents are at work and their older siblings are over on the east side of town, and there's any kind of trouble or problems, who do the kids turn to? So you're creating a great security issue. I know you're trying to save some money, save some bucks, but it's like you're throwing good money after bad. And our concern is the children and the quality of education that those children will receive. If you can convince us in the Linden area that they're going to get a better quality education by making this move, then I'm sure we'll go with it and find a way to do that. But at this point, we are not convinced. We're definitely not convinced. And the problem that we have is that you've got so many different entities involved in this, and you're trying to bring them together all of a sudden, and we fear that it's going to create a great problem. The Linden area has approximately 200,000 votes, and we would love to give those votes to all of you and all of the city council folks and all the folks who want to help our children. But we're going to have some major problems if something is forced down our throats that we are not yet prepared to receive. And that's my message to you this evening. And I want to thank you for your time, and I want to say God bless all of you, because I believe that you have the best intentions of our students at heart. And that's what matters, those kids. That's what really matters. So,
Thank you,
if you have any
Pastor.
questions, I'll be glad to entertain your questions.
Are there any clarifying questions, colleagues? Pastor, thank you for coming down this evening.
Thank you.
We appreciate your service.
Dr. Baker, thank you.
Thank you. All right, I do believe that is our final speaker for the evening. So let's move right into our superintendent report, and I'll call on Dr. Stanford if he's prepared to report to the board.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the Board of Education. My reports over the past few months have often started with or included messages about the safety and well-being of our students. Unfortunately, tonight is not an exception. For as much as we do to protect, nurture, and love our students in the 7 to 8 hours that they are in our care each and every day, we cannot keep them away from the dangers that they may face away from our buildings and after-school hours. Tonight, our district mourns another young life that ended way too soon. Last Friday, we learned of the tragic death of Briggs High School sophomore Corey Magruder, who was killed when the car he was riding lost control and hit a tree. His brother Casey, a 9th grader, was hospitalized as well. Throughout that day, our crisis counselors with the district's care team were made available to support our students and staff members at Briggs who were dealing with the sadness of Corey's passing. They are helping the students and staff to better understand their emotions and to address the loss of a loved one. Sometimes, students and adults may not know how to process a tragedy like this one. So our counselors and social workers remind us that students do better when they receive accurate information about what has happened, when they are explained in a way that's appropriate for their age, and when a caring adult who is ready to be there is there to listen to them. The students and staff at Briggs High School continue to keep Corey's family in their thoughts and prayers, as I hope we all will do so as well. The students at Briggs High School are also organizing their own tribute to Corey in the coming days, and I will definitely keep the Board of Education posted on the development of that tribute. Let me now transition to a brief update on the work of our Community-Led Facilities Task Force. Yesterday was the first in a series of additional community meetings to give our families and stakeholders more opportunities to have their questions answered and to share their thoughts and opinions about the proposed recommendation. I want to extend a warm appreciation to President Baker, Vice President Cole, Board Member Gibbs, and Board Member Reyes for attending our meeting last night at Mifflin Middle School. We have 2 more forums left this week. Wednesday, we will be at South High School, and Thursday, we will be at East High School, and we encourage the community to come out and participate in these forums. The community meetings, both community meetings will begin at 6 p.m. and will end approximately at 7:30 p.m. I have begun each of these community meetings with a reminder that change and progress in Columbus City Schools has always been made stronger when the community's voices are a large part of the process. And that requires all community voices to be heard, not just some voices. I have appreciated the large and engaged crowds at all of the meetings so far. The community's participation is proof of the widespread interest in the deep personal passions that our community has for the future of Columbus City Schools and the education of our young people. There is always an emotional element when proposed recommendations, such as the ones that we have created, propose any kind of change for the community and our students. The emotion, rightfully so, is expected with conversations of this magnitude. We are considering the closure of and/or historic change to a number of schools in our community that they love so dearly. This type of decision should never be taken lightly, and we have not taken it lightly as an administration or as a facilities task force. So I also want to express my appreciation to those who have come to the meetings with open minds and who have been ready to have constructive conversations that give us an opportunity to hear as many of the voices in our community as possible. Not just a handful, not just the loudest, but those who really want to express their viewpoint and really want to participate in the process to make it work, knowing that no decisions are final yet. Board members, please know that the Facilities Task Force is still on track to consider the feedback from all of the community forums and from our online sources to make a final set of recommendations to you before the end of the month. Next, we want to take a moment in tonight's meeting to spotlight a new and exciting partnership in the district between the team at our Spruce Run Environmental Education Center and the amazing Columbus Zoo and Aquarium. Spruce Run remains one of our district's hidden gems, but thanks to the work of Coordinator Jerry Granger and several others in the district, we have expanded the curriculum offerings at the center. We have also increased the number of students who get to experience nature up close and personal at the center. Please join me, members of the board, in welcoming Ms. Granger to the podium. She is also joined this evening by Catherine O'Malley from the Columbus Zoo and Aquarium, and I don't see Mr. Reynolds.
Been delayed, so I'm going to speak for him.
Okay. Dana Reynolds, who is a family representative of the Patton family, who donated the Spruce Run Environmental Center to the district many years ago. And so at that, I will turn it over to Ms. Granger.
Good evening. Good evening, President Baker, Vice President Cole, Treasurer Bohoric, Internal Auditor Smith, members of the board, and Interim Superintendent Dr. Stanford. I want to thank all of you for allowing Catherine O'Malley from the Columbus Zoo, Dana Reynolds, and myself to speak with you today. We are here tonight to simply say thank you. Thank you for allowing community partnerships to be an intricate part of the learning process for our Columbus City School children. We believe that it is because of this partnership our students gain more experiential learning than would normally take place otherwise.
The Columbus Zoo's Classroom Safari program, which is made possible through the generous support of Battelle, has been partnering with Spruce Run for 3 years to advance science learning with 5th grade students, helping them understand and internalize science as part of their everyday experiences. The Classroom Safari program consists of 3 components, which work together to teach students important critical thinking and problem-solving skills so they can make effective decisions for the environment in the future. These components consist of classroom visits, field trips to Spruce Run, and a free family day at the Columbus Zoo. The Columbus Zoo visits 24 Columbus City School classrooms throughout the school year, reaching approximately 700 students. These hour-long visits introduce students to the skills they need to implement the scientific method in the field. These lessons come to life with visits to Spruce Run. Columbus City Schools is so beyond fortunate to have this space where students can explore nature and truly understand the world around them. So many of these students have never seen a deer, let alone explored a creek. Spruce Run gives them this opportunity. The students have the chance to get into the extreme, and we encourage them to think like scientists. They use real scientific tools to observe native species and to learn more about our natural habitats right around us. Students then use this exploration to form testable questions, design experiments using trail cameras, and these trail cameras are placed throughout the Spruce Run property. Data collected at Spruce Run is analyzed, and each class develops their own scientific report detailing their findings. This is then published as the Student Scientist Journal. This journal will then be used for future students who are looking to continue the research that has begun at Spruce Run. This journal of student work is included in your packet. Columbus City School students are then invited to bring their families to the zoo to celebrate their completion of the Classroom Safari program and to celebrate their hard work.
In closing, Dana just wanted to say he gives a heart-filled thanks to you, President Baker, Vice President Cole, Treasurer Bohoric, Internal Auditor Smith, members of the board, and Interim Superintendent, Dr. Stanford, for allowing programming such as Classroom Safari, continuing at Spruce Run, to embrace his family's vision that they had some 40 years ago. He feels they would exceedingly be pleased with the stewardship of this gift and wants to thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Granger, and thank you as well to you, Ms. O'Malley. And I think it's us who should say thank you and be grateful to the Patton family for the gift of this center all those years ago. And so it's an opportunity that our children have that many other children don't have. And so it is a great asset of the district, and your stewardship of it and your partnership critically important to our ongoing success. And so actually the board, I do believe, is planning to be out there sometime soon for a retreat. And so we look forward to that. Any other comments or questions? Dr. Stanford?
Really amazing ESP there, because I definitely wanted to say something. You know, I just wanted to say real quickly that, you know, the Columbus Zoo has been a fabulous partner to the center, and I had the opportunity to meet some of the staff members from the zoo this spring when I was visiting the center, and got a chance to talk to them about the activities that they have created for our students, and it's just an amazing, amazing opportunity that you provide our students. I still remember as an adult having the opportunity in my school district to go out and experience nature firsthand, and that will be a memory that our kids will have with them for their entire lives. And so thank you for giving them that opportunity. And to Ms. Granger, thank you very much. Your love for our kids and your love for Spruce Run is probably unmatched. And if there is another person that has more love for our kids and for Spruce Run, it would be Mr. Reynolds. Yeah. Every day. Every day. Every day. I mean, he was there the day that I was there, and just, you know, doing all types of odd end jobs and maintaining the grounds and helping you to keep it alive. And so, you know, all the years that you have spent and your, you know, my conversations with you, you are still excited about the center, and you're coming up with innovative and creative ways to make it even better. And so we, again, just thank you very, very much.
Is Jack Hanna here? I was hoping. Did he bring any animals with him? Ms. Gibbs had asked about animals this
It was
evening.
raining, so we couldn't bring the cheetah. I'm sorry.
Okay, next time. Next time.
When you come out to Spruce, we'll make sure.
We will see him then. If there are no other questions, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you so very much, Mr. President. thank you all at Spruce Run for giving students access to such a wonderful, wonderful asset. I had the rare occasion to be exposed to something like this, similar in Cleveland, at a place called Shaker Lakes. But nothing that, at least at my time, brought this level of actual applied study and use of data and scientific method and integrating that in the learning process. I really love it. I think it's incredibly innovative. This is a definitive document that gives you an idea of what the method of science was that was utilized, what the test results were, how the students actually learned. I read a paragraph in the back. Our class was wrong about seeing more animals in the open field. We proved that there were more animals in the stream. When we went to Spruce Run on the 6th of March, we saw more animals in the stream and there was less animals in the open field. Our class hypothesis was wrong. It should have been more animals. It should have been more animals would visit the stream and less animals would visit the open field. What this tells me is this, is that you gave students a space of comfort to be wrong about something, but equally be curious about how they got it wrong. I love this. I think it's phenomenal, and I'm so glad that we're in support of such a phenomenal asset. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Gibbs.
So, thank you. Thank you to the Patton family for leaving such a treasure that will really benefit students for a lifetime. Thank you to our teachers who find the alignment for experiential learning, right? For taking advantage of the opportunity and being able to integrate it. So I wouldn't want you to come all this way in the rain and not ask you the most important question, especially before he gives his 5-year forecast. If there's any way, if there's any way, I'm asking you a budget question before he does the budget.
Okay.
We could support you. If there's anything this board could do to help support your work, what would that be, monetary or not? Or if there's anything, you have a lot of people in the room that can make a lot of things happen.
Did you just give me the magic wand?
I gave you the magic, yeah. But how could we better support your work? What could we do to help?
I think one of the things is already in progress. After a great conversation that I had with Dr. Stanford when he came out, we're really thinking outside of the box. It's a program that, for me and for all of the students, I don't want to see disappear. We're reaching out to grants. We're reaching out for funding. We're reaching out for people that just want to give a gift. I have friends and colleagues that when they found out the price of a bus to get 50 students out there was only $175, they're like, I want to adopt a bus. And so we're starting to go through the process with legal to see what it needs to happen for us to be able to take donations and have them be directly put into Spruce's basket. So we have started those procedures. We continue to work with great partners such as the Columbus Zoo. Our new one is the Nature Conservancy, and we're just getting a lot of support. So as long as we can keep the doors of communication open, I think we're going to have another fantastic year.
Awesome.
We're super excited.
And to our team, if an elementary school or if a school wants to access Spruce Run, how do they do that?
Okay, so they contact me, either email or through my phone. I look at the calendar, double check to see what days are available, get back with them. Then either myself or anybody from the science curriculum team helps them plan and coordinate. And then we get a bus and they come out.
Fill all your slots to
Yep.
make sure all of our students have an opportunity.
So for the last 2 years, out of 180 school days, we've booked 120.
Yes.
So it made a big jump. It was 30 days, 60 days, 120, 120, and right now I'm booked till the end of November. So right before
Awesome.
Thanksgiving. So we're doing it.
Good. Great job.
Yeah, thank
Big
you.
thanks to you, to the zoo, to our continual partners at Battelle, who help us in every facet of our life, and to everyone who's going to adopt a bus. everybody who's going to adopt a bus, to everyone who's going to adopt a bus through the PTAs at those schools. I'm sure if you'll give, we'll work out a way to get some students there.
We're making it happen.
That donation again for the bus?
175. 175.
I'll even take a half a bus.
We'll take a half a bus.
I too want to thank you, but my question is, what's the distribution of this wonderful?
That's you.
So all the students received their hard work, every teacher that participated. So within each school, I work with obviously multiple different teachers. So I do the entire 5th grade. So all the teachers got it, and every single principal received the journal.
So do people, ambassadors of the Columbus Zoo get this? Do we have access to the, online or anything so that we can promote this wonderful work
We
that
could
our
definitely make
scientists?
something like that happen so that it was online for everyone to have access to
Dr.
it.
Stanford, Scott Varner, can we make that happen so that others can see the great, our children are published.
Yeah, they are published.
So, I mean,
We have it electronic, so
this
it
is
would
a
be no big deal.
publication. This is I think it's something to be proud of and for other people to be able to see. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for your time.
I've got the next bus. Just let me know where to send the check. Superintendent?
One final note, President Baker and members of the Board of Education. You know, there's a great saying that this great university called The Ohio State University uses a lot. So let me get it started by saying OH. Before the start of this weekend's Buckeye football game, our Centennial High School Marching Band will perform at the Ohio State Marching Band's Skull Session at St. John's Arena. If you are not familiar with it, the Skull Session is a family-friendly pre-game pep rally and concert that takes place before every game. Our Centennial Marching Stars will perform at 9:00 a.m. Admission is free. Let me say that again. Admission is free, and the doors will open at 8:00 a.m. I strongly encourage everyone to come out and support our student musicians as they show off their talent at one of the many time-honored traditions at an Ohio State University football game. With that, Mr. President and members of the Board of Education, I conclude tonight's presentation.
Thank you, Superintendent. Board Member Gibbs?
Yes, to the second part of that, I think it was just confirmed that the Fort Hays Metropolitan Singers will be singing on the field at the football game, and they will be performing in the 50th anniversary of the MLK tribute. So I think I just saw that as well.
Any other questions or comments for the superintendent's report? Board Member Reyes?
I know that we're going really briskly through the report, but can we have a moment of silence for our students as we practiced in the past?
Yes, let's do that. So we'll have a moment of silence now for our Briggs student that we lost. Thank you, Board Member Reyes. It's always tough to lose a member of the family, so it's important that we recognize that. That concludes your report, Mr. Superintendent.
Yes, it does, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir. And seeing no other questions or comments, let's move on then to our internal auditor. Madam Internal Auditor, have you anything to share with the board this evening?
Thank you, President Baker. Actually, I do not have a report this evening. We had to cancel audit and accountability. I'm trying to get that meeting rescheduled, and once that happens, I will let the board know that date.
Thank you very much, Board. We'll look forward to that. Mr. Treasurer, have you a report for the board this evening? I know you have.
Yes, I do. President Baker, Vice President Cole, members of the board. This evening, as soon as it comes up, I will walk you through the 5-year forecast as of October of this year. The forecast, as you know, covers multiple years. For this forecast, it covers the fiscal years 16 through 18, which are actual data, and then 19 through 23 5 years on a projected basis. As I have done in the past, I have extended the projection based upon trends for an additional 3 years beyond fiscal '23. So this will cover about 9 fiscal years. And I do that primarily just so you get a much longer-term perspective on it. And in our language, you can look at levy cycles, quite frankly, and get a better picture for what's coming down the road. This document was reviewed by FAC on September 12th, and they only needed 1 meeting to go through it. Sometimes we have 2, but they went through it, and they were satisfied with it and helped with some of the options that I presented to them in terms of how to, some of the assumptions that we would make, and they helped out with that, and this is the end result of that. I always like to remind people that forecasting is a very difficult task. One of my favorite quotes when it comes to forecasting. Also remind you that there is a legal requirement that the board adopt a forecast. We adopt one prior to October 31 of each fiscal year and then update it somewhere in the spring between April and May. Our typical cadence in the spring is to have that presented to the Finance Committee in April in anticipation of a May presentation to the board and adoption. Recently, this section of the code has changed. It has changed the October deadline to a November deadline. As I understand it, the law became effective like in November 2nd, which was after October 31st, so it doesn't apply to this year, but it does apply to next year. I understand also that the reason for this change is primarily, as I see it, primarily intended to allow those districts that would have a levy on in November to wait to do their forecast or finalize their forecast until they see the results of the levy. As you might recall, in 2016, when we had a levy on the ballot, we did an October forecast, could not include the results of that levy and the funds generated by that levy in the forecast at that time. So I came back in December with a revised forecast, which you adopted, and then we submitted midstream. So in this way, you know, for those districts that do have a November levy, it allows you to prepare a more timely forecast. We often have that discussion about preparing the forecast, and this will be the case next year when we get into a period of time when the state biennial budget is under consideration. So we'll be preparing a forecast in May, not knowing what the state will do, and that's one of the variables that we will face. A lot of information out there on how to read a forecast and mentioning the caveats and things that you have to consider when you look at a forecast. And it's interesting, I mention this every time, that the Ohio Department of Education's publication, out of all the points that they make, they pull these out, especially when it has to do with variables that'll affect your forecast in the future. They specifically mentioned state budgets, which, as we all know, we've had some surprises and less than successful results with, but just keep in mind that things do happen and change. I prepared most of this back in August so that we could talk to the Finance Committee in September, and now here we are in October, and I can tell you that as we review the monthly financial statements for the current fiscal year, there are things happening on the positive side that will have a positive impact on the forecast that we don't include yet. So it's a very dynamic situation. I will tell you too that we do most of our planning with the forecast in the background. So when we think about changes to our behavior, we think about how it impacts the forecast over a long period of time. So we're not planning and thinking, behaving 1 year at a time. We do take a very long-term perspective to it. Just remember, this is a snapshot in time, and things are likely to change. So moving on to the actual forecast, and let's begin with some events and things that have changed and been updated since the May forecast. First and foremost, we've got the actual results for fiscal 18, positive results. We picked up about $7.5 million in cash balance, which factored in. 18 did overall prove to be very favorable for us, and that cash balance rolls out into the forecast as well as increases the base upon which we base our future projections. On a state level, we continue to assume that the cap will grow at 4% annually, and I'll talk a little bit about the cap later on. And also, we, as a result of the conversation with the Finance Committee, we have been talking about our spending patterns in non-personnel for quite some time. And so we've taken into consideration in this forecast, looking at the budgets that the departments all put together, the 5-year budgets they put together, and have slightly, to prepare a cash flow plan like this, we've taken that into consideration and put in a little bit less, assuming that there'll be some underspending of those budgets over time. As you know, we do this very conservatively so that our general expectation is that actual revenues exceed plan and actual expenditures come in under plan, which creates favorable variances for us. And so we're beginning to tweak that. Not that we're making it not conservative, but we are recognizing that there is a pattern there. So we're going to take some of that into account. Kind of in a nutshell, I looked at those patterns, and if there was a certain percentage variance, I took about half of that variance to factor in when we looked at the expenditure patterns. So a little bit less conservative, but I still call this a conservative forecast. So let's take a look at some of the major revenue categories. I will tell you that online at Board Docs, the full forecast is there along with 40-some pages of notes discussing each line item for your reading pleasure, your convenience. Let's begin to look at property taxes as our major revenue source. I will tell you in all my graphs what I've done is I've included a trend line on each of the graphs based upon the 5 years of the forecast. So here you'll see that the orange dotted line is a trend line, again, based upon fiscal years 19 through 23. And I do that so that graphically, not only I, but you can look at the data to see if there's anything that looks odd, that jumps off the page at you in terms of, rather than looking at a chart full of numbers, you might not be able to discern differences. But to look at this and be able to ask a question, gee, the trend line looks like this, but this data over here is above or below the trend line, what was going on. So this is a pretty good example of what I'm talking about. Look at fiscal years 16 through 18, the actual data. It's not on the trend line for what we've got for 19 through 23. And the explanation of that is we passed a levy back in November of 26, was in the middle of fiscal year 17. And so you can see those two lines for property, those two dots for 17 and 18, that's the revenue beginning to be collected on that new levy. After that, without a new levy, property tax revenues remain relatively flat, and in this forecast, we've got an annual growth rate of an average of about 1.23%. The next largest revenue source, state revenue, our foundation money, as you can see, is pretty much flatlined there. Again, this represents the 4% cap growth annually. It projects that we will remain on the cap. What could get us off of the cap? Well, the only thing really that's going to get us off the cap, because I doubt that the state will necessarily change the funding formula where it cuts all that funding and brings the calculated amount down to the cap. The only way that we're going to get off the cap is if the cap and the growth in the cap is rapid enough to get us up to the calculated amount. I've heard that stated as a goal of some politicians, but I don't see that gap closing for us. So the only way we're going to get off the cap is if the cap growth annually is in excess of anything that they do to the calculation. So when you hear talk about the state aid and they're increasing the dollar amounts per pupil, that's really nice for those districts that are on a formula. But all that does is quite often widen our gap between the calculated amount and what we actually get. So again, in this forecast, and as far as I can see, we're going to remain capped. One of the third largest line item is property tax allocation. This is reimbursement from the state for the portion of property taxes that they roll back, that 10.5% and 2.5%. A rollback that they would pay. It also included, and again here, look at the trend line and go, well, what's going on in 16, 17, and 18? That shows a decline, and now you've leveled it out. What was happening there was this line also includes the reimbursement for the loss of personal property taxes. That was being phased out during that time period and now disappears from fiscal 19 on out. That's why this line stays relatively flat during the life of this forecast at just under 1% annual growth. All of the revenues combined, and I'll just point out, it looks like it's trending down, which it is, but we're dealing, and I know this will sound odd, but the other revenue sources were in hundreds of millions of dollars, and this is in tens of millions of dollars. So you'll see $1 or $2 million decline each year. Again, conservatively forecasting this because this line item includes things like investment income, pilots, payment in lieu of taxes, the income tax sharing that we get from the city based upon the incentive plans, the economic incentive plans that they've adopted, our win-win payments, and our Medicaid reimbursement. Those are the big contributors to this line. I will tell you that I've forecasted investment income conservatively declining from about $5.8 million in fiscal 18 to $3 million in fiscal 23. If we have declining balances, not sure what interest rates are going to do, but you don't want to overestimate that line and count on something that may not materialize. Pilots I've projected at an average, 5-year average of about $4 million a year. Income tax sharing at about $2.5 million, $2 million per year. Win-win payments, as you know, we've reached agreements with just about everybody to end the win-win agreements. They'll be pretty much gone after fiscal year 21, which explains some of that decline. And then I projected Medicaid reimbursement flat at a 5-year average of about $3.4 million per year. That brings us to total revenue graph that looks like this, and on average, it's about a 2% annual growth rate in total revenues overall. Looking at fiscal 19, just to give you a breakdown of where the dollars come from, of the $935 million total for fiscal 19, $507 million comes from local property taxes, $355 million from state aid, and $72 million from all other revenues. Of that $72 million, about $34 million is represented by that state reimbursement. So you could take that line and either add it to the state and, say the state provides about $400 million, or you could add it to our local property taxes. But bottom line is, everything is tax revenue generated, either from local property taxes or from the taxes that the state levies and collects. So that's the big breakdown there. On a percentage basis, you'll see that 54% funding from local property taxes and 38% from the state. That rollback represents about another 4% of income, so you could say that the state funds us at about 42%. So absent those two sources, local and state, we have a very small slice of the revenue pie that comes from other miscellaneous things, as I mentioned before, the investment income, the pilots, the revenue sharing, things like that. Taking a look at major expenditure categories, the first one is personnel. So we always start out with personnel, as you can see. Personnel expenses are projected to grow from about $597 million to $716 million in 2023. This projection includes the balance of the 2016 levy personnel that was promised, the addition of those persons. And I will tell you also that we do include, as I had I believe I had this in the last forecast, a 1% across the board for all staff in each year of the forecast, and that's a placeholder that is entirely subject to collective bargaining. You might look at this and say, okay, what was going on in 16, 17, and 18? What's happening there? I will tell you that, oddly enough, if you're familiar with anybody who's on a 26 pay plan, that every so often you run into a time period, whether it's a fiscal year or a calendar year or a contract period, every so often you run into a period where there's 27 pays. Now, a lot of times people say, well, now you're paying people more than that they've earned. And that's not true. When you get into a contract year, you have to manage your way through that. But in this particular case, it just occurred during a fiscal year, and that was 17. So we had one extra pay that rolled into fiscal year 17. Makes a little bump and an aberration in the graphing of the data, but that's all that is. If it had not happened, that would be a straight line, and interestingly enough, that trend line would be above where we are right now, because the new trend line is based upon the reductions that we did this past spring. So when we talked about reductions then, and I believe when I did the May forecast, I discussed with you that as a result of all that work on the reductions, we actually had a shift in the line downward on our expenditure projections. So I'll show you here in a little minute how we answered the call of addressing a deficit. Non-personnel and all other I've lumped together. This is based upon, as I mentioned before, the 5-year budgets that are put together in the spring, and some minor reduction of those amounts to represent what I believe to be a truer cash flow picture. Total expenditures then grow to just under 5% annually over the life of this projection. Looking at the 19 expenditure breakdown, you'll see that of the $907 million projected for 19, about $597 million is related to personnel, that's salaries, wages, and fringe benefits. Purchase services, about $263 million, and the balance split out for other and non-operating type of expenditures. I will note for you, as always, that in purchase services is embedded the expense for charter schools, the deduction for charter schools, and of that $263 million, close to $200 million is for the charter school deduction in this projection. On a percentage basis, you'll see that at least for Columbus schools, 66% is personnel, about 30% for purchase services, but you know that the vast majority of that purchase service percentage is charter schools. Were they not there, we would look more like other school districts, more typical expenditures of in that 85 to 90% for personnel, if we didn't have that huge charter school expense kind of distorting the picture. But that shouldn't be news to you. So bringing this all together, the revenue and the expense projection brings us to one of the important numbers on the forecast, and that is cash balance. Here you can see revenue and expenditures laid out together, revenue in the blue numbers and expenditures in the orange numbers. And then the bottom line there is revenue over under expenditures. You'll see that hovering right around zero. At times we will build a cash balance, and then early on in this forecast we begin to eat into our cash balance. The inflection point is in 2020 when we begin to experience a declining cash balance. This is one of the early indicators when you look at a forecast that you can say, well, in 2020 you start to eat into your cash balance, so it's something to keep in mind as you look out into the future. Our ending cash balance that's projected, as you can see, climbs in 19. Well, actually, since the passage of the levy, it's been climbing in 17, 18, and 19, which is typical. You do build a cash balance in the early years of a levy cycle, and then after that it begins to decline as expenditures exceed revenues. You'll see that during this 5-year period, we are positive in all 5 years, albeit in 2023, $23 million barely gets us through the weekend, but positive nonetheless. And again, I carry this out for you. Not that I want to dash anybody's hopes, but I want you to understand that that downward trend in cash balance, if carried out another 3 years, is untenable. Also, this is the 30-day cash line. Another early indicator is as you approach your 30-day cash line, there is need for some sort of a reaction to that. If we drop below 30 days cash in 2023, we're fairly close to it in 2022. I look back to October of 17. I wanted to give you the picture back then and talk about how we went from there to now. And as you can see, that line is dramatically different. But we knew that back then, and we set forth from there to address the deficit. And we addressed the deficit in 2 ways. One, we looked at the deficit. One of the first things we pulled out was favorable cash results for 18. So we pulled that out and decided we didn't need to address it. We assumed that would happen. We were partway through the year, and we were well on our way to some favorable results. So we pulled out a significant sum, I think about $30 million, out of that deficit and said we don't need to address that. That will occur organically, that'll be covered organically, if you will. But then Dr. Stanford and administration and budget managers sat down and began a very thorough and thoughtful look at expenditures and came up with the budget reductions that you all saw in the spring and approved. And so, coupled with the favorable results, the expenditure reductions that shifted our projection for expenditures, that whole line downward, in essence, that changed the whole shape of the curve. It allowed us to then address the deficit in this fiscal period. So I guess what I'm saying to you is we did our job as an administration in recommending to you how we were going to address that deficit during that time period. Because quite frankly, we did not have the other side of the equation to deal with at our disposal. And the other side of the equation was increasing revenues. That was not on the table at that point in time. So given that, I know budget reductions are difficult. I know we gave up some things that we love. But from a financial perspective, from a financial picture, we did the stewardship part. We did make this forecast work, and we are positive through this forecast. So I'm pretty proud of that work. I just want to talk to you about some leading indicators, if you will, from an economic, economists always talk about leading indicators. So for school districts, here are a couple of leading indicators, if you will. The first one is the inflection point when you begin to spend more than you bring in on an annual basis, which occurs for us in 2020. And the second one is when you drop to 30 days cash or below, which is roughly 2022. Both of them indicate, if you look at this, how it trends out for you. They give you this 2 to 4 year warning that something's on the horizon and that somewhere in that time period you need to respond to this behaviorally. And as you well know, we've got two ways to address these future deficits. And I don't need to go through those. You know what those are. So with that in mind, that's your 5-year forecast. It is slated for approval or be presented to you for approval at your board meeting on the 16th. And as I said, the FAC looked at it, Finance Committee looked at it, and that concludes my report on the October 5-year forecast.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Are there questions from board members? Mr. Vice President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Treasurer Bahorek, for this presentation. I have a few questions. The first is, how have we integrated the zero-based model as, in place? How have we integrated this zero-based budget model into this 5-year forecast?
The expenditure side of the equation for non-personnel is totally based on what Scott does, or our budget manager does, with all the other department heads. So I actually don't do the non-personnel side. Scott is to credit for that. And we use that as our basis. In fact, when we put that together, it extends out we do it in the spring, and at that time the forecast only goes to 2022. But when Scott does it, he's already dealing with 19 and 5 years after, so he goes to 23. So he's actually preparing all the expenditure work for the October forecast. So it is 100% based on that. Now, we did modify it. We reduced those numbers a bit for the expected underspending of those lines. So this becomes more of a cash flow document rather than a budgetary planning document. But there's a one-to-one correlation there.
I thank you for that. I'll ask some more questions, but not relative to that at this time. Does this forecast account at all for the federal Cadillac tax?
Yes, sir.
All right. Can you explain that?
We're anticipating, I'm trying to remember the year that it kicks in because it's been pushed out, but it's several years out of the forecast, and it's in the $6 to $9 million per year range that has been estimated for us. And I have a line in the guts of my spreadsheets that specifically identify. The Cadillac tax is part of the Affordable Care Act. Mm-hmm. It is a penalty, if you will, for the health care program that you offer employees and the cost of that program. I don't know exactly the calculation. We have a firm that works with us on our health care management system and helps us set rates and looks at all of that. And I've asked them to estimate what they believe that penalty would be, assuming that it comes into play in the year that is currently planned. But it keeps getting pushed back. So we just keep pushing those numbers further and further up, but it is in there.
Okay, I thank you for now.
All right, any other questions, colleagues, for the treasurer? Ms. Gibbs?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You know what I'm going to ask. In this forecast, are there room for any surprises?
Is there,
Or do you
which kind of
anticipate-
surprise would you like? Board
I don't
Member
like any
Gibbs?
of them, but,
I know, that's, I know you don't.
But for as much as we're watching legislation, as much as we're watching, I guess we're entering a lame duck session, and I know Dr. Roush may have some more detail, but as we're watching it go through, do you anticipate or are we tracking any significant changes in the state legislature or in Congress that would impact any of these projections as of right now? And that can change, you know.
I don't, and Dr. Roush could speak to federal level. I don't know of anything federal that I'm worried about. I'm intensely concerned about the state budget. And to the extent that this November election dictates that, I've heard that the state budget results are favorable. Is there a correlation between them doing well in their budget to plan and them giving K-12 education more money? Your guess is as good as mine. I'm always concerned that the cap growth will not be what we expect. I've talked to my colleagues. Some are inordinately conservative. They're down at 2% growth. I've talked to others. They might have a little bit more, 5%. No one's doing 7 or 10 that I know of. But yeah, I think probably my biggest variable of that I'm concerned about is that the state budget and its impact.
And based on that, is 4%, you're comfortable with that number? With that 4% growth?
It's what we've received in the past. I have nothing to cause me to move off of that one way or the other.
That was at 7%.
We went from 7 to 4, so.
Right.
And we can anticipate that, so I'm just.
And the thing about it is, we could recast this at 2%.
Right.
And probably go negative in 23. But because we're so close to the state budget, we're not going to do anything behaviorally. I'm not going to ask you to go to Dr. Stanford and say, okay, start another round of reductions. But we did the round of reductions because we knew what the state had come up with. That was a known quantity that affected us negatively, so we needed to respond. We could recast it. It would just give you a different picture. It's kind of, if you had a portrait and you changed the tone or the saturation of the color, we can do that, but I would not recommend to you doing anything behaviorally different. So again, we have to wait, see what happens, and then decide in the spring, what's that impact and what do we do for fiscal year. At that point in time, we'll be talking about fiscal year 20 and beyond. On the revenue side are most of the surprises that are the ones that I'm most worried about. On the expenditure side, I don't control the expenditure side. Do we have room? There's always room for discussion about how the board, once you see this kind of a forecast, how do you want to spend your dollars? What do you want to? I've been doing this for a long time. And board members in the past have always asked me, so how are we doing? Are we going to be okay? Next year, we're going to be all right? And I would look back at a board member and say, well, it depends. Do you want to teach third grade next year? I mean, you have to tell me what you want to do. And that comes from Dr. Stanford and his team to look at what do we need to do academically to get where we want to go. And then Scott and I sit down, and as we always tell people, we put numbers to things. We help you put numbers to things. And we don't let you forget that if you do this, there's a number attached to it. But we also don't necessarily let the numbers drive what you really need to do academically. That's not our philosophy. But I don't see any expenditure surprises.
That's why I value our value-based budgeting approach. Just for the benefit of us and the listening public, the next budget comes out? Is that June 2019?
Dr. Rouse can tell us, because we're going to get a new governor.
Yes.
And
Here he
I
comes.
think the new governor gets some slack in preparing his budget, or her budget, his budget. It will be his budget.
President Baker to Board Member Gibbs, as an incoming governor, they have until the middle of March to introduce their budget. So it actually is going to be a very shortened time frame for the General Assembly to act, so that'll get introduced in the House. They have until mid-March. The House will get through its process, get it to the Senate, and then the goal always to get it to conference committee by June. June 30th, we'll know, well, there have been budgets in the past that have gone past June 30th, but we'll say that all things going according to the way it's supposed to go, by June 30th, we'll know what the final budget is. It changes throughout the process, from the introduced through the House to Senate through conference. It changes several times. Formulas can change, variables can change, dollar amounts can change throughout that whole process.
Okay. Thank you very much.
What we'll do when we get to March, because that will be right in the middle of preparing it, we'll at some point grab the best information we have. And if the governor's budget says, X percent, and we're hearing that the budget, remember when we heard a couple of years ago that they were facing hundreds of millions of dollars of budgetary issues, and they talked all the way from 5 to 0 to Armageddon kind of a thing. But we'll decide in March, look, we got to make a decision and just put it together. And then the point of that will be, if we know we have 4 in and we're listening, and you adopted at 4, and we'll continue to listen and update. And if the conversation is 3 or 2, then, like I did before, I can show you when we do that March budget. We'll run it at 2. Or, I'm sorry, not budget, but March, when I prepare the forecast in March for presentation in April and adoption in May, we can run various scenarios so you have an idea, so that when you hear that conversation and you hear about the Senate or the House wanting to set the cap at a different level, you will be able to know, wow, if they move it 1%, that costs us X millions of dollars over the life of the forecast. So we can do that. That's my hurricane map, if you remember.
Okay. Thank you. That's very beneficial. And people may feel or think that March is very far off, but remember, it was just graduation, right? And where did September go? So our budget conversations, after the election, all the holidays, this conversation will be amongst us very quickly. So thank you very much for that. Thank you, Dr. Rush.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Okay, so we've talked about the ambiguity, as we always do, of the state budget. We've had some very serious asks and requests as a board, and we've heard from the community as well with regards to this concept of equity. We got the state report card. We are at an F. What does this budget mean? What are the implications of this budget from going from F to better? And I know that this is a continuing conversation because we don't finalize this budget until May. But I just need us to really keep that in perspective. How do we, based on this budget as it stands now, what are we doing, prioritizing, moving from where we are to our next dimension or our next better dimension of greatness, toward greatness? What does this mean?
I might begin that conversation by saying we will hear from the administration at our next meeting about the report card. We will then plan some work sessions so that the board can dive more deeply into the report card, and I think that will help to educate our decision-making process as we go through the budget process. Superintendent?
Mr. President, to Mr. Cole, that's exactly what I was going to state, is that this forecast gives us an opportunity to really take a hard look at our performance as of last year, and using the strategic plan that we created to then start to create specific tactics and specific activities that we can implement this year to really try and tackle using the data from our short cycle assessments to really target the opportunities for growth that our students have and that we can possibly achieve this year. So that'll be a part of the presentation and a part of the work sessions that we definitely would like to have with the Board of Education to take that deep dive into that data so that we can make proposals about activities that we can hopefully implement moving forward this year yet to make some difference with our students' achievement.
I thank you very much.
Board Member Reyes?
Stanford, when you're talking about those changes, or when we started discussing the grade card, when do you anticipate making the adjustments to the strategic plan? So, we kind of were introduced to the strategic plan. Obviously, the report card is having some impact on that. So you'll present to us next meeting on the report card. How much time do you feel that you will need in order to make adjustments to the strategic plan before presenting it maybe again to us?
It's a good question, but I will remind you that we are in the middle of the treasurer's report.
I know, but he mentioned the question, so
But if he opened the
I
floodgates.
can't remember it in 2 months.
Superintendent?
Mr. Baker to Ms. Reyes. The strategic plan, we won't be proposing dramatic changes to the strategic plan because the strategies are strong. The SMART objectives are strong. It may require some tweaking based on the data that is generated by the new report card in terms of the SMART objectives. Where the opportunities may exist are at that activity level in the strategic plan. And so there may be some activities that we add to what is already stated. Because remember, when we went through the strategic plan, there were a whole lot of other activities that we didn't list.
Correct.
Because we wanted to really just focus in on those high leverage activities. And so, there may be some additional activities that we want to make high leverage as a result of the report card and the performance that we saw on the report card. And so, again, the academic services team under the leadership of Ms. Gillison is working with our accountability team under the leadership of Dr. Klein to really dig deep into that data and to identify what are those initiatives, what are those activities that we can implement yet this year that will be cost effective and give us the best bang for the dollar in moving the needle for our students being successful, come this spring when they have to take another round of state assessments.
See, Dr. Stanford's wrapped it back to the dollar that goes back to the treasurer. Thank you, Dr. Stanford.
He did a good job. Anything else for the treasurer? Mr. Treasurer?
Just one closing comment. If you notice on the very opening page, this is not my handiwork alone. Controller Mike McCammon chimes in. Certainly Scott does from, as I mentioned to you, the expenditure side is to his credit, the non-personnel side. And then also Dr. Roush helps with providing yet another set of eyes on the document and writing some economic outlook and economic environmental forwards to the notes to put it in perspective for us. So it's truly a team effort across multiple parts of the district, and we spend a lot of time in my office going through all of this. So I appreciate their help and assistance to put together what I think is not only a good forecast from a financial perspective, but a nice looking forecast as well. So we try and do that as best we can as numbers people. So I appreciate that and thank them, and I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. So thanks to you and the Finance and Appropriations Committee, Budget Director, as well as Dr. Roush. And so we'll see this again at the next meeting. We'll be prepared to vote on it. And if board members have any questions between now and then, they should direct them to the treasurer. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Let's move on then to our consent agenda. Is there a motion that we adopt the consent agenda as presented?
So moved, Mr. President.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded. Questions, comments on any piece of legislation contained within the consent agenda this evening, colleagues? Board Member Gibbs.
Just really quickly, people often ask us about the health of our district. If you look in our number 16s, you will see a number of community organizations that are donating to our schools. They're investing in some very significant programs, everyone from the National Coalition of 100 Black Women to the Shriners to the Board of Realtors. And Mr. John Karsten, they're investing in after-school programs, they're investing in leadership programs, they're investing in our construction and trades programs, and they don't have to. So a huge thank you to everyone who is deciding to partner with us to provide additional opportunities for our staff, our students, for their careers and for their futures. I think it's just tremendous that they have volunteered to do so.
Absolutely. Thank you for highlighting that, Board Member Gibbs. Not seeing any other comments. Mr. Treasurer, are you prepared to call the roll?
Yes. Ms.
Please
Reyes?
do. Mhm.
President Baker?
Yes.
Vice President Cole?
Yes.
Ms. Gibbs?
Yes, except 10.2 where I abstained.
That motion carried.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Let's move on then to announcements. Any of you colleagues have very brief announcements? Let me not forget to call on the treasurer. I think we have someone who came up earlier who you can now officially announce.
Mr. President, members of the Board of Education, I would like to welcome as our new interim elementary school principal at Mays Elementary School, Tiffany Ganton. Ganton?
Yes, you said it correct.
Thank you. Who is moving from being an assistant principal at Huey A.G. Bell.
All right, now colleagues, any very brief announcements or points of pride you'd like to share this evening? Ms. Gibbs.
Yes. The 30th anniversary of the Kiwanis College Fair is coming up. Kiwanis International has been a partner with Columbus City Schools for more than 30 years, and on October 9th, they are hosting their annual college fair with over 175 colleges represented, as well as apprenticeships and military branches. From 9 to 12, they have continued to sponsor the buses, right, to make sure all of our high school seniors are able to attend. Send your senior to school on October 9th so they can attend the college fair. And if you want to attend in the evening for your sophomores, juniors, freshmen, I would say as early as middle school, you can go from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And they say bring the whole family, and it will be held at COSI. Very proud of their work. We have seen them here before, and they continue to provide just this tremendous service. It is the largest college fair in Central Ohio, and it's one of the best places. So wear flat shoes, come with a set of questions that you have that you want to ask, not what the cafeteria is like. It's totally different in college, right? But come and ask about their programs. Come and ask about cost of living. Come and ask about do they have your major and what classes you can take free of charge while you're in Columbus City High School through College Credit Plus that will transfer to the school of your choice. It's a tremendous opportunity, and I hope everyone has the opportunity to take advantage. So that's one announcement. Secondly, the Innovation and Reform. We'll meet on the same day from 5:30 to 7 before we go over to the college fair, and we're meeting here in 270. That's a change from last year from downtown high school. So next week is 5:30 to 7. And finally, you will hear not next week, but very soon, my point of pride, other than a sixth grader explaining to me at Mifflin Middle School yesterday his views on the proposal in great detail with statistics. That was incredible, would be our visit to the Nashville Academies. Look forward to us bringing you a full report on what we found and we discovered. I thank Dr. Stanford and Ms. Wells for their leadership, Director Johnson, who attended with us, as well as some of the administrators that helped us get a full 360 view of an amazing academy. We will be bringing that report forward in the future.
Very good. Thank you. We can't wait to see it. Any other announcements? Board Member Reyes.
I was going to talk about the marching band, but I want to take it away from you. Can I give that to you? No, I'll give it to you, and then you go first, and I'll go Harmony Project. All right.
Please, he insists.
So I will go marching band after him, but just wanted to kind of highlight our Harmony Project. I was able to had the pleasure of visiting them out at South High School as they're starting the year. Just absolutely want to thank them, David Brown, the Harmony Project, all the city year volunteers, Nationwide Children's, the administration, our administration that supports that wonderful program. The excitement, they were talking about what they were going to do this year, and a song that they were preparing. I'm not going to, that from a Harvard student. That's amazing. And just hearing and him asking our students, have you ever been to New York? Have you ever been to Philadelphia? Outside when we've taken you as a district, or when we've taken you through Harmony Project. And a lot of our students have not done that. So they have the opportunity to, even if they don't know how to sing, some of us don't know how to sing, I don't know how to sing, but I was very moved earlier, to have that experience, to be in an organization, in a group, the commitment that it takes. David does not play as what is required for you to be a member of that choir. And I just want to thank the administration for having that program highlighted in our district. Nope, I'll leave it to you. Because I always take it away from you.
I know the Vice President has some comments, and then the Superintendent can talk about the invitational. No?
Go right ahead, and I'll
Superintendent,
do mine.
they really want to hear about the invitational.
Yes. Yeah, so, Mr. President, members of the board, I just want to first thank Betty Hill and her team for
Stand
a
up, Betty Hill.
fabulous job. For a fabulous job at the Band Invitational last weekend, but also with the national, international rollout of Will Haygood's new book, Tigerland. Mr. Baker, Ms. Hill, and Ms. Bauer, Krista Bauer, and a number of other individuals, including the principal of East High School, did a fabulous job of acknowledging the rollout of the book and the, did I say O'Reilly? Baker, I'm sorry, Ed O'Reilly is who I meant to say. They did a fabulous job with the rollout of that new book. And it was really just fabulous to see our community come out and support our students and support the legacy at East High School. But also, our families came out for the Band Invitational. It was a wonderful day of music and performances by the drill teams. Linda McKinley won the award for the most improved band, and Centennial High School won the award for the best performance of the bands. And again, whenever we can celebrate the achievements of our students and celebrate them being able to showcase their talents, it's a wonderful day. And again, we owe it all to individuals like Betty Hill and the rest of the team in the district for providing our students that opportunity to shine.
Absolutely.
I would emphasize that, Dr. Stanford and President Baker, the reason I gave it up is because this is part of our team, but your team, and you were out there most of the day. But what I want to do is I want to let people know about the importance of supporting programs like this. I talked to Betty about, I come from South Texas, and those bands are huge. You know, that's where I played. I go home and I see my 300-piece band. I want to be able to see that here, the same pride. Our children are so excited to be out there. They need band uniforms. They need strong band boosters, our parents. We do a very good job of supporting our teams, families, and communities, but our band, they need that support also. Being a musician takes a lot of work, a lot of discipline. You know, even the smaller bands, when they go and they perform, you and I were at the Clipper Stadium when Lyndon went out there, and they were blowing, and they were performing, and they were in front, and they were nervous, but they did a really good job. So we need those opportunities, those strong opportunities for those students, and I'm looking forward, and I want you to anticipate there's going to be a nice video performance about that weekend that you can see on Channel 25 and our website, and she's working on that now, and I really want you to look at the talent that Columbus City Schools has.
Vice President Cole?
Go ahead.
Ladies first, Ms. Gibbs.
Just one more I didn't want to miss. October 1st, maybe Dr. Stanford or Ms. Gillison can speak to this. FAFSA is open, right? So Ms. Gillison or Dr. Stanford, can you speak to FAFSA and why that is important?
Ms. Gillison, please.
Thank you, President Baker, Vice President Cole, to Board Member Gibbs' statement about FAFSA. Year after year, billions of dollars go unclaimed for young people to go to college, and that's because our families do not complete the FAFSA. The FAFSA window is now open. If you plan on your child going to college, it can be a reality. You have to sit down with your school counselor, with the I Know I Can advisor. There are documents that you can bring, but there is money. Once again, year after year, billions of dollars are going unclaimed because our communities, our parents, are not completing the FAFSA form. When it looks like college is out of the question, I'm here to tell you it is not. Billions of dollars are going unclaimed. Talk with your counselor, your I Know I Can advisor. Every high school has one. Please talk to them so you can see the documents you need to bring. College is a reality for our kids.
Yes. The FAFSA is the federal application for financial student aid.
Free
student aid. I hear y'all. Free student aid. And so please, I know high school is a time to kind of lean back, but senior year, I need you to put the gas on and complete those forms. So in the spring, and even now, if you want to go early decision, when you go to the college fair, you can have your determination done of how much your expected family contribution is. And if that's zero, then you are walking in that college fair picking what you want, not just what you can afford. Okay? It's not what you want to have, it's what you want to work to have. And if you put in the work now, you can go anywhere you want to go.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbs. Anything else, colleagues?
Lastly, President Baker and I had the grand opportunity of attending the Council of Urban Board of Education that focused, it is a subsidiary organization of the National School Boards Association, where we participated in a number of robust discussions around equity, around how to integrate and create an equity policy. So there's some things that we look forward to reporting in the very near future as well. Regarding this and making some actionable steps even towards building equity here in Columbus City Schools. So thank you for that. And with that, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion. It is moved that the Board of Education recess into executive section per section 121.22 G1 to consider the appointment, employment, or compensation of a public employee or official, and per section 121.22 G3 to confer with an attorney for the public body concerning disputes involving the public body that are the subject of pending or imminent court action.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Mr. Treasurer?
President Baker?
Yes.
Vice President Cole? Yes. Ms. Gibbs?
Yes.
Ms. Reyes?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. The board will now recess into executive session. We have 5 topics to discuss. We will be back here just as soon as possible. Thank you for your patience. Thank you. We just recessed out of executive session. Thank you for your patience. Thank you to those of you who are still here with us this evening. I would like to offer a resolution. Whereas there is a vacancy on the Columbus City Schools Board of Education, and whereas Section 3313.11 of the Ohio Revised Code and Board Bylaw 0145 give the board the authority to appoint an individual to fill an unexpired term, and whereas the board has received notices of interest from individuals interested in serving the unexpired term, now therefore be it resolved that the Columbus City Schools Board of Education hereby appoints Brian Stewart to fill the unexpired term. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Mr. Treasurer?
President Baker?
Yes.
Vice President Cole?
Yes.
Ms. Gibbs? Yes. Ms. Reyes?
Yes.
The motion carried.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. I'd like to read a statement from the board. Finding a solution that will provide valuable time to thoroughly evaluate the impressive list of candidates seeking to fill a vacancy on the Columbus Board of Education, board members have voted to appoint Mr. Brian Stewart to the empty seat on a short-term basis. Mr. Stewart is a former Columbus School Board member and was vice president. He was first appointed to the board in 2009, was then elected in 2011, and served through 2015. We're fortunate that Mr. Stewart has stepped up once again in service to the district, our students, families, and community. He recognizes the importance of this role and has committed to fill the seat for the short term, allowing the board to take the proper time we need to find the best candidate to serve on our Board of Education. No specific length of time has been set for Mr. Stewart's service on the board, though it is expected to last no longer than through the end of November at the very latest. Mr. Stewart has indicated that he is not seeking the permanent position. Ohio Revised Code requires that elected school boards fill empty seats at their next public meeting no sooner than 10 days following a vacancy or resignation. The deadlines set by the Ohio Revised Code to fill vacancies on boards of education are simply too restrictive for large districts such as ours, where we have a large community filled with many committed individuals ready and prepared to serve. The stakeholders of our district deserve to have a process that provides the greatest opportunity to find the best candidate, and we want to take the time to review every person who has submitted their interest in joining the board. As you all know, 55 individuals submitted materials to apply to serve on the board, and so all of those individuals who applied will continue to be part of the process. So we will be letting you all know more just as soon as we can. So unless there's anything else for the good of the order tonight, is moved and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Treasurer?
President Baker?
Yes.
Vice President Cole?
Yes.
Ms. Gibbs?
Yes.
Ms. Reyes?
Yes.
The motion carried.
Thank you. We stand adjourned. Good night, everyone. Thank you.